Raj and Drew show for entrepreneurs. We are continuing our series, 2024 Strategy Toolkit. I'll get it out. And we're excited about this. Our entire motivation behind this 2024 Strategy Toolkit is to give you the tools necessary for you to be successful, for you to excel, for you to beat the competition 2024. And how do you do that? You got to plan. You got to use the proper tools for the job. So we are talking about planning. We talked about a strategic roadmap last week. We touched on that with some questions that you can ask your business. You can ask your team. You can think through, reflect upon as a business leader. And then we talked about growth as a process. And Raj very eloquently lined out what growth as a process is. And I'll refer you to our last episode to check that out. Tonight, we're going to talk about KPIs, or are we going to talk about OKRs? I don't know, Raj. You're going to tell us. Are we talking about KPIs or OKRs?
So basically, Drew, we are starting with OKRs.
Okay.
And the reason I want to use, so OKRs stand for objectives and key results.
Okay.
So the first thing I would say is everybody does a strategic plan, and the outcome has to be is what are the 4 to 6 objectives that we want to drive and reach our goals for the next year.
Yes.
So that is the first piece of it. And what is an objective, right? People say, okay, objective is what? It is more of a qualitative statement. And the whole purpose of a qualitative statement is to set the direction and the tone for the company, for the organization, for the employees, and for the leaders.
So for a qualitative statement, can you give the listeners an example of what you mean by that?
So basically, I would go back and give you an example from my company I just worked last week. So we came up with 4 different objectives. One is develop and enhance the people strategy. We want to work and go back and really work on the people side of it. Second, we wanted to optimize our technology to enhance productivity.
Okay.
And the third is organic growth. We want to go back and increase our revenues. And the second piece of it is we want to increase our profitability, or we call it margin.
Okay. And those were all the 1-year objectives for your group? Okay. So we have a timeline on it. We have a timeline on it.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically, once you come out of the strategy plan, we need to come back and say, hey, this is the goal. So everybody says, I want to increase revenue from X to Y. That is a similar, typical goal everybody gets.
Okay.
But people, most of the, especially the small businesses, they stop there. But if you go back and spend some more time and think through strategically and say, what are the objectives that will help us to get there? That is the next level of question. And that is what the strategy plan has to be used to help us get there.
So they're your contributing goals. You have your overarching goal, take it to just a regular person. Let's say someone has a goal, January 2024, they want to be 20 pounds lighter. And so some of their objectives might break down their calories that they're going to take, what their workout plan is going to be. Those are the kind of contributing factors that are going to enable you to achieve the overarching goal.
Yes. So I would take that one level above and go back and say, the first objective is I want to be healthy. That would become an objective. The key results is how can I be healthy is by reducing 10 pounds or eating healthy, or eating something else. So that would be the key result.
Okay.
So if they go back and eat healthy, and if they go back and do the exercise, then the objective of being healthy comes into picture.
Gotcha.
So that is what it is. And what is interesting is when people hear of OKR, one thing, it is relatively new. It has been in existence for less than 6-7 years, if I would say. Intel really started this, and then Google really made it very, very famous.
Okay.
So this tech company started this, and I really like it. But what I want to go back and tell people is, don't think that it is only for big companies. All small companies can really benefit it.
Yeah.
So the first rule of thumb I tell people from an OKR perspective is, what are the 4 qualitative statements? And what I recommend companies is never go beyond 4 to 6 objectives. As a business, you never want to go beyond 4 to 6 because you can't handle beyond that.
And you're saying per year?
Per year, yes.
Yes, okay.
And those are the objectives. And each objective can have 3 to 5 key result areas.
Okay.
So that is what it is. So definitely, if you go back and look at it from a big picture, let us say we went 4 objectives and 3 to 5. Let us take the 5 key result areas. So you got 4 times 5, about 20 metrics to look at.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yes. And that is where I go back and say, those are becoming the key performance indicators. I use the word interchangeably. There are subtle differences between the two.
Yeah.
But from a small business perspective, for me, the key results and basically the KPIs are similar.
Okay.
Again, this is my definition.
Yeah, would you kind of how I'm understanding it right now is maybe your OKRs are almost like your lead measures, what you're going to do to achieve the goal, and the KPIs are kind of like, are you the lag measure, have you achieved it? Is that kind of the dynamic, or?
Yeah, the objective can be the direction if you want to look at it. And basically the key results are like your guideposts. If you look at a football stadium, right, you have the 20-yard, 30-yard, 40-yard, you always have those 10-yard lines across, right?
Yeah.
So those are all like the milestones for you. Those are all the key result areas. Like people strategy. Let me take an example. Like I was talking about, one of my client was having a people strategy. So objectively, everybody knows that we need to work on our people, right?
Yeah, but there's many different factors to that. There's hiring, there's training, there's retaining.
Exactly. So now you take that piece of it and you divide it into 3 to 5 of those things.
Okay.
So one of the things which we were talking about is do a complete internal assessment of talent and make sure that we have the right people in the right seats. So we are looking at everything else and doing an assessment of our current talent pool. That is one initiative. Have we done that or not?
Yeah.
Now that becomes a key result area. The second one is basically each one of them, do they have a customized training and did they get the training? So once I do the organizational assessment, now I know the gaps, right? So some people I might be changing. Some people I might be saying there are a few gaps that they need to fill. And how will that happen? Customized training.
Yeah.
That would be a second key result area.
Because through that assessment, all of these things are going to be uncovered. You might find that, the people that scored low on their attitude at work, wow, we found that 9 out of 10 of them hadn't gone to our orientation. And so maybe they didn't understand our culture, what we're trying to do. They hadn't really bought into the vision. So now we need to make sure all those people go back. So all those things will be revealed. And I think it's so good, just to reiterate what you said earlier, that most small business owners set the goal, they set the objective, and that's it. And it's almost like the person that says, I'm gonna lose 20 pounds by January 1st. Okay, how are you gonna avoid eating all the stuff at Thanksgiving? How are you gonna, lose more weight so that you can hit that goal, by that time? How are you gonna navigate all these holidays? And it's really diving in deep and finding out, assessing, figuring out what the challenges or problems might be along the way to hitting that goal and discovering those in the process. And if you miss out on that, you're very unlikely to hit the goal.
Exactly. So now you can go back and measure things and go back and look at it from a quantitative perspective. So the objective is always qualitative.
Okay.
Subjective. The key result areas are always going to be quantitative, that can be measured.
Okay.
And that is the big difference between objectives and key result areas.
Okay.
And when you go back and talk about KPIs, I just want to clarify that piece of it.
Which
KPIs
stands for?
Key Performance Indicators.
There we go. Perfect.
So whenever you have key performance indicators, a business has several performance indicators. What are important for you from a strategy perspective? What are very important from driving the objectives that you need? Those become the key. That's the reason why they're called KPIs, key performance indicators.
Yeah. And
people who really don't have a lot of experience, they don't distinguish between performance indicators and key performance indicators, and they put in 35 metrics. Guess what happens? They're so busy putting all the metrics and dashboards, nobody pays attention to it after a few weeks. So the key is some of the metrics can be done at the process level or the activity level, and the person in charge can do it. But from a strategy perspective and a leadership perspective, we need to always look at what I call the vital few. That is a terminology I use to go back and look at it and say, you have the vital few, the key performance indicators, and the trivial many.
Yeah.
And the trivial many can be delegated and somebody can do with that, but it really doesn't move the needle. And that is what we need to go back and look at it. As senior leaders, you need to be looking at it from the piece of it, which is the key piece of it.
Yeah.
And the alignment with what your goals and what are the objectives for the next 12 months are. So if your strategy meeting is concluded and you don't have this defined, either it can be calling as KPIs or OKRs. One of those two things, whichever language they use, those have to be very, very clearly articulated.
Yeah.
And somebody in the company has to be accountable for those.
Yeah, well, and just by doing that, like you said, the vital few, it goes back to another leadership thing that I'm harping on all the time. It's the leader's responsibility to set the priority. And this is another opportunity for the leader to say, these are the most important things to me and this organization on where we're going. And because every department's going to have their own, right? The HR
Yes.
department is gonna be interested in all the things they have to be interested in as far as taking care of people and making sure all their processes work. The sales team, they wanna hit their own sales goal. That's the most important thing to them. So what is the most important indicator that the leader of this organization? It's just another way to add clarity to your organization, and so that your team can understand what when they're in those moments where they could spend their time every day. We have these, right? I could spend my time doing this project or that project. Well, if there's no key performance indicator guiding that decision, they're just going to do the thing that they like the most, or that they just want to get off their plate, or whatever, right? Whatever is going in their head at that time to pick which project they work on. Whereas if you can very clearly say, hey, here are the things that are most important to me, this is priority, they're going to do the project that's in alignment with that. Hopefully, that's the choice that they would make.
And another key advantage of the clarity around either it is a KPI or OKRs is that will start pushing your team, stretching them beyond their comfort zones. Let me give you an example of a different company. One of my other companies for 2024, they want to grow their revenues by 35%.
Okay.
Some people say that is a KPI. Some people say that is an OKR. For me, it is still an objective. Objective is increasing the revenue, and they're putting a number around it.
Yeah.
But the key result areas come back and say is, how are we going to approach that 35% growth? Just saying I want to grow by 37% and work hard will not help.
Yeah.
So for them, they broke that down into 4 different variables. They wanted to go into a new customer segment, and they were expecting 10% growth from that. They were expecting to launch a new product, which would give them 18% growth. Then they were going back and saying, we need to go back and do e-commerce, and we are expecting another 7% growth from that. So they took the 35% and they came up with 4 key result areas and saying, these are the 4 things we are going to do, and this is going to expect us to give us this. And they're resourcing it. They're putting the time, the energy, the budgets around it to go back and make it happen. So now you have the objective being is increasing revenue. And for a reference point, 35%. And then they have 4 key result areas. New product, how much is that going to be? New geographic location, what it is and stuff. New customer segment, how much that is going to be there. And some people can go back and say, productivity, I want to save some money, and that will help as well.
Yeah.
So that is the clarity. Now I have 4 next level leaders, each one responsible for one. So there is a new marketing manager who is responsible for new product. They are responsible for 10% of the goal. Then they have a geography, and they're going to appoint a new person, and his first role is just to go back and develop that market. So that brings a lot of clarity, and now they have the accountability as well.
Yeah.
My own business, I'll give you an example. I wanted to launch a product for really helping small businesses in groups because I wanted to be cost effective.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it for 2 years, but never launched it. The reason being is I didn't have the resources. I was going back and looking at itself. But I said, you know what? I spent too much time. And this year, I generally start my planning in the month of September. That's what I recommend all my clients. You always want to look at your 1-year plan and 3-year plan in the month of September. And then you can make certain tweaks by you come to Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Which we talked about in Growth as a Process.
Exactly. We did that in the last episode. And guess what? I went back and said, the biggest part of it is I am not able to spend time on that. So I hired a person, and I have somebody who's completely their responsibility. My job is to coach, mentor them, and then deliver the product as people come. But everything else, from marketing, from sales, talking to people, every single piece of it, I delegated to somebody else. So I got a new product leader for my product, and that person is responsible for everything else.
Yeah.
And now I am very confident that in 2024, that will be a success, because now I went and said that is very important. And then I put in the resources. I put key result areas within that. I always had the objective, but I never had the key result areas. And
Greater
that
clarity.
is what happens. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now I know that. I know this person, what budget they need. Everything has been set. And now there's execution.
Yeah, so let's bring this back to our audience and just make it super practical. So let's say last week they wrote down some of their strategic plan, roadmap. They really thought about their values, their mission, their purpose, mission. That's we use those interchangeably. So they've defined their purpose, their values, and they've got they got a big goal and they put a deadline on it. Now they're starting to work towards that goal. And so you're saying over this next year, as we finish out 2023, going into 2024, you need to sit down with your team if you have a team, and you need to make sure you line out 4 or so objectives, no more than 6 objectives that are going to help you achieve that overarching vision that you have for the year. And you're going to break it down into subcomponents. And then from those 4 to 6 objectives, break it down into a smaller bite and assign it. And that's where the accountability comes with specific quantitative or numerical goals, right? So I want to lose 20 pounds by January 1st, 2024, right? So now we're very specific, or you might say, I want to go from 240 pounds to 220 pounds by January 1st, 2024. That's your vision. Now you're going to break that down and then break that down and bring some accountability to it with the key results.
So Drew, I can give you an example of a local bakery in my town.
Yeah.
So basically this bakery, one of the things they really want to do, the objective was revolutionize the town's breakfast habits. Big objective, very, very qualitative, but not quantitative.
Yeah.
So that's a great objective. What do you mean by that, right?
Yeah.
So one of the key result areas was they were supposed to introduce 5 new healthy breakfasts. They want to revolutionize the town's breakfast habits. And you look at how are we going to measure that? Okay, did we introduce 5 different pieces of it and what it is? And the second part of it is how did it go back and help us increase the revenue? And not only they saw the people changing, but their overall revenue increased by 40% in the morning sales section.
My goodness.
And this is the actual piece of it, because now they have 12 months of data. So that is an example. They had only 2 result areas, 5 breakfasts and volume.
Simple.
So I want my town to be healthy. That was a big, ambitious goal. They marketed it and communicated that. And that's how are we measuring it? Do we have 5 different breakfast items that are very healthy? And they communicated that to the community. They started pushing those things. And then they're seeing if they're getting the profitability piece of it. So that is a very, very simple example for even a small bakery, one store bakery. This is not a chain or anything else. It was a local mom and pop store.
Yeah.
And it really worked. And they grew their business by 40% in the breakfast items.
And they gained a bunch of data on their business, and they know what they have something to look back on, and that's going to inform their future decisions, because now they know what contributed to success. They set a clear goal. They put measurement around it. They tracked its progress. And that's kind of what I want to get into next. So it's not just enough to state these goals. It's not just enough to define key results and even assign. So you have to define, you have to assign, but how do you recommend bringing about that accountability? I know we talked about growth as a process. Does growth as a process, having those every other month check-ins enough, or do you challenge your small businesses to do one-on-one meetings or weekly staff meetings, or kind of how have you seen people do the accountability piece successfully with OKRs?
So basically, it changes from different levels. And let me explain. If you're looking at the CEO level, right, those can be measured on a monthly basis.
Okay.
And sometimes even quarterly basis, if depending on the size and scope of the company. So let me take the example of this. 5 breakfasts, right? We said the bakery and there were 5 healthy breakfasts. So they had to pay attention to it on a weekly basis to see how people are responding. So the real story is they introduced 9 and 4 of them were not very well received. So they went back and introduced every month a new breakfast, and they kept adding to that. And anything that was, and they were constantly taking breakfast from their patronage and say, what do they think? All 9 were healthy, but 4, the people were not receptive. The way I understand is 1 was pulled after just 5 days.
Wow.
Because nobody wanted that piece of it. and they were getting the data. So that is what it is. So if you go back to the person who is really collecting the cash, right? Basically the cash register in the bakery, that person has to evaluate on a daily basis. The person who is coming up with the concept and stuff, they had to be active at least on a weekly basis. And the owner has to be looking at it from a monthly basis because they want to make sure the company has enough money and profitability to grow. So it is the same objective, but different measurements at different levels so that we can successfully accomplish the objective.
So basically, you just have to make it work for your organization and for the objective, whatever it is, whatever the timeline. If you have a longer timeline, then maybe the cadence is spread out a little more. But if we're talking a shorter timeline, we want to be very, overuse a word, but very agile, in our approach and be able to make pivots very quickly, then you're going to want to see that data more often.
Yeah. I mean, if you can take an example of, let us say, a IT company. Daily or weekly will be too small of a data point. It will not give them enough information. They need to be looking at it at least on a quarterly basis. How the users are responding, how the customers are responding, and things like that. So that would be there. So definitely there is going to be a situation where you work with and see what is appropriate and are you getting meaningful information? That is the key. Are you getting meaningful information to help you to make decisions, no-go decisions, or modify or change decisions?
Yeah. That's good. So, I mean, the benefits are huge from really defining OKRs or KPIs. You can call them whichever one you want. I find them both very well, but you're going to get clarity around what you're doing. And if you're unclear at all as the leader of the organization, your team is lost. So I've heard it said, when you are sick and tired of hearing the vision or the initiative or the objective, whatever word you want to use, but if you're sick and tired of talking about it, it's just starting to set in with your organization, with your team. And I think that's so true. As a leader, you've been thinking about this probably before September, but your team just found out about it whenever you introduced the plan to them. And that was the first time they ever heard about it. So you've got to really think through your team's perspective and understand that if you think it's super clear, it's probably somewhat clear to your team or a little bit clear. So continue to reinforce it. And by being disciplined with OKRs or KPIs, you're going to get that clarity. You're going to set the priority for your organization. So you know that in those moments when your team has to make decisions, they're going to be equipped with the information to make the best decision. You're going to, at least on the outside, create systems for accountability in your organization. Now, every leader has to make sure they're following up so that accountability is taking place. But you have a framework for accountability, and then you have information to reflect upon from that year once it's over, so that you can make better decisions moving forward. So there's so many benefits to really breaking down your big initiatives, your big goals into these bite-sized chunks that everybody can understand and use to make sure we're focused and moving in one direction as an organization.
Yes,
that's powerful.
Drew, the power piece of it is really evaluating and making changes as you need. So a simple example, basically, I started working with a new client of mine in August. So we identified 8 different key result areas. And we went back and defined project charters around each one of those things. And they have been working since then. Some are close to finish line, some are in between from an execution and a learning perspective. But I was talking to the CEO and a couple of senior leaders, and we were looking at some information for 2024. And from the lens, we went back and looked at these things, and 3 were a top priority. They didn't have the resources initially, but now they became a top priority. There were 3 which were very important. We are just going back and putting them on hold and not spending any more time because they're not relevant anymore today. So that kind of it has to be evaluated at least once a quarter. If you go back and look at the VUCA, if you remember the episode from VUCA, that is what it is. A minimum every quarter, we go back and look at our objectives and key result areas and say, has anything changed as anything become irrelevant or anything has become more priority than the others. That is what you go back and respond to your market, learning with it and the accountability piece of it. That is the other piece. This will help us because we know what we are focused on. And as soon as we get more additional intelligence from the customer, from the market, from the environment, then we see and evaluate and say, how is it going to affect? And that is the frequently discussions that we need to happen. And this will help us to focus and reprioritize things as it is required for the business.
That's good. So that's where my brain was going, because you're saying, look at this information quarterly. That's what you advise, and really do a kind of a pause for a moment, reflect, think about where we're at, what's going on, what is the market telling us, and have that moment quarterly. Now, you referenced the bakery that within 5 days, they had just pulled one dish. And I'm sure it's because they just didn't sell any. I mean, just people didn't buy it. The food went bad, and they were up to order again the food, and they said, let's not order it. Nobody wants it.
Exactly.
Because I know these things, you talked about the leader making a decision, and looking at this information so that they can make decisions. Every organization is different, right? Some CEOs, they're going to want the KPIs on their desk every morning. That's the first thing they look at before they have breakfast, right? That's one type. Do you have any, I want to say, principles or any guiding thoughts that you give to people? Because some are going to lean more into their intuition. Others are going to just look at the numbers and make a data-informed decision. Are there any principles or anything that you kind of wise counsel you give to your clients as it relates to OKRs, KPIs, and making those decisions that are kind of those 49-51, right? Decisions. They could go either way. Do we hold on to this a little longer? Do we try to sell that healthy breakfast for 1-2 more weeks or a month? Or do we just cut it off now? Any wisdom on how to kind of make those decisions as you're going along throughout the year?
I mean, basically, they have to evaluate the data.
Okay.
So basically, if the same example, let us say for one reason, they introduced breakfast number 1 and nobody was buying it for 2 weeks, let us say. They introduced number 2, nobody was buying it. Introduced number 3. So by the time you come in 3 months, nobody's buying any of the breakfast. So they need to go back and strategically look at it and say, is this something that is happening there? Are people not buying it, or are healthy breakfasts not meeting the needs? So they need to go to the drawing board and say, is this still valid? Or we need to go back and redesign our products or bring in some specialist. Are we missing something from a customer point of view? So they're making minor changes on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, but strategically, they're making it on a quarterly basis.
Okay. So tactical moves like just removing that one, that's a move we make in the moment. Quarterly, we're going to look back at the actual strategy. And really what I think of with strategy is almost your strategic bet. You invest in certain companies because you believe that the CEO or the new product that they have is going to do really well, and you hope to make money off of it. That's a strategic bet. You're looking out in the future. You're saying, I believe these conditions are going to be perfect for this product or this service that the market's going to introduce, so I'm going to invest. Same thing with your organization. You're saying, okay, let's step back and let's say, do people in this area just not like healthy breakfast? And maybe we should just serve up some more greasy food. I mean, that's what people want.
Exactly.
Or do we say, you know what? I think our marketing plan had some holes in it. We were advertising on Facebook, and our clientele, they get their marketing stuff from cable TV, and so those are two different places where we could be advertising, and we missed the boat or something. I don't know. But really, so you're saying step back and kind of look at everything and say, did we just approach this the wrong way quarterly, but tactically make the adjustments along the way, because that's really what's going to give you the data to make a decision from as well. Okay.
Exactly.
That's good.
Again, bro,
that's really
just
good.
Let us take the NFL. Everybody knows NFL, and this is the season, right? If you go back and look at it, if you look at it from a game point of it, as soon as the offense lives that, what are they doing? They're going back, watching the video, watching the pictures, everything else, and they're making changes.
Yeah.
Whenever the defense comes back, the defensive coach is looking at the defensive players and doing it. Special teams, the same thing. So they're making instantaneous minor changes to the game as it is progressing.
Yeah.
In the halftime, what do they do? The head coach comes in and he looks at everything else and makes certain strategic changes.
Yeah. Halftime
that
adjustments.
Is at a higher level. Adjustments. And if you go back and look at it on Tuesday morning, generally after the game is done, they really take everything from a learning perspective on Monday, and Tuesday they're addressing those shortcomings or whatever it is, or totally throwing away some place and bringing in new place. And if you look at it, some teams become so strong after 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks into the game, and some teams becoming weaker and weaker going to that. That is because they're not making those adjustments ideal for it.
Okay.
And that is the way, I mean, it is a sports analogy, but in business, that is what we need to do. There are some tactical stuff we need to do at a constant basis, but strategically we need to make at a higher level at a different frequency.
Yeah, no, and I think the timeline rings true, because using that analogy, you've got our strategy is built out over a year, maybe 3 years. We have a big vision, but we still break it down into a 1 year. What are we trying to accomplish this year? Well, their entire season is 18, 20 games every week. So a quarterly, a quarter for them, a quarter of the year is 4 games. Right.
Exactly.
So they might make massive changes 4 games in. You might see a new quarterback come in, a substitution there. And then their tactical stuff, whereas we might, as a small business, make tactical decisions, once a week, they have to make them once every 5 minutes or less, because the timeline, once again, the entire football game is
3 hours.
3 hours for the game, but really 1 hour of actual clock time, right?
Exactly.
So it's a condensed version of what we're doing. I think that's a great example, even if you're not a sports person, just to understand the condensed timeline that they're dealing with and see how they make moves versus how we as small business leaders make moves. So that's good. Anything else on that we should know, that all this wisdom that your clients get? I mean, we're getting it for free right now on the podcast. So any other KPI, OKR, final thoughts you want to share before we call it an episode?
See, basically, I want to tell people is, if you're coming out of a strategy meeting without some sort of metrics, some sort of initiatives, then you're missing the boat. You're missing the point, because execution becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
So one of the things I tell people from all my people is 30% is coming up with a strategy. The strategy plan is only 30%. 70% is execution. And 70%, a lot of businesses fail in the execution piece of it, because they're coming up with a strategy, but they don't have systems in place. They don't have OKRs, or they don't have KPIs or metrics or anything else. Or they create the metrics, but nobody's looking at them for the next 12 months. So the right goals and the right metrics are so key for your success.
Yeah.
They make your strategy a reality. That is what I want to go back and tell people about, is definitely, even if you don't have a full-blown strategy, let us say you don't know what strategy planning is, perfectly fine. The simple question you can go back and say is, how much do you want to grow your business next year? And what are the 3, 4, 5 ways you're going to grow the business? You answer those 2 questions, you're doing an OKR.
Yeah. It's the whole, what does success look like, right? Define it specifically, not, I want to be happy next year. Okay, that's great. Awesome. But how do we get to happiness? how are we measuring happiness? And so really diving in and defining what that is, I think that is key. And I already talked about all the benefits, but there's going to be so many benefits to your organization, and it's going to make that leadership process, the part that I really like to dig into, it's going to make that leadership side of things so much easier if you've clearly defined what it is you want the team to do. Because if you don't define it, then it's up for interpretation. And if it's up for interpretation, there's a lot of wasted time, because someone could think, hey, I think, the people side of it, we just need to have more potlucks. So every Friday, let's do a potluck. That's going to solve our people side. Well, maybe, but that's just a shot in the dark. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's no real thought put into that. It's just an idea that one person had for their department. And so we really have to think into this. And you, as the leader, have to define, and then also get help. What is I know we're kind of running over, but one more question. So let's say we walk out of our strategy meeting and we have an overarching vision and we have our objectives, but we only have one real key result or one KPI per objective, because we don't know enough, or the people in the room didn't know enough about those departments to really define what those key results should be. Is that when we engage with our team and say, hey, what are some key results that we should be looking for here, or fill in, or how does that dynamic work?
So I'll take the example of basically the revenue, right? 35%. One of my clients is going after 35% revenue growth next year. If they only have one, let us say new products.
Yeah.
They have only key result area. So whatever they do, will the new product give them 35% growth? And if immediately the salesperson will say, hey, I can't grow this business. Let us say 35% of the growth is equivalent to $5 million, just for mathematical reasons.
Yeah.
So, hey, whatever I do, the new product will only go back and give us 1.5 million this year. Then immediately you go back and say, hey, this is the market potential, this is the time, and we can get 1.5 million. Immediately they need to go back and ask the question is, where is the other 3.5 million coming from? What are the key results that we need to do so that that delivers 3.5 million? Or you know what? We are very, very good in Connecticut. Can we go to New York, which is an adjacent state, and we can do that? Immediately somebody does the research and say, you know what? The market is very good there. We can generate 1 million there. Okay, great. Now that becomes the second key result area. Now I got 1.5 million from new product, 1 million from New York. What else we need to do to get to the other 2.5 million? So even if they start with one, but they're saying, will this help us to get to that goal, which is the objective piece of it, then they'll go back and pushing themselves and keep on changing. That's where the monthly piece of it and the quarterly piece of it, each one of those are coming into picture.
I like it. And I like I like getting your team involved, because I think there's greater buy-in on down the road if they helped to contribute to how to achieve the goal, right? If they were part of that plan, then I think from a leadership perspective, it reinforces the vision or the objective in their heart going after it. So that's great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And in simple example, like we've said, the new product, right? We have the marketing manager as responsible for the new product. So he or she is accountable for that. So they will do the analysis, come back and say, guys, I signed up for new product, but my whole new product will only deliver 1.5 million this year. So please don't hold me accountable for 5 million. I can do 5 million in 3 years.
Yeah.
So each one of them, because they're accountable, they'll bring it up. If not, if nobody's accountable, they'll say, I'll keep doing my best. And then you come November, December, and you're doing still 1.2 million, and we missed the whole 10 months or 11 months. So that is the accountability piece of it. We want to encourage people and come back and say, hey, I can do 1.5 million, but I can't do 5 million with this. And then people will start brainstorming and saying, what are the other key result areas? What do we need to do?
That's good.
Most of the people want to change the metric. What I tell people is, don't change the metric. Think of creativity and innovation and say, what can we do different things to get to that?
Yeah.
And that constant feedback, constant review, and the feedback loop of the data and information will always give us an opportunity to work on that. That is what I encourage people. Don't change the goal.
Yeah.
Go back and change your approach, change your process, change the people, change the key result areas, whatever that is required. Explore everything that you can do.
But you only do that if you're tracking, if you have a goal and you're tracking your progress towards that goal. And that's what OKRs and KPIs are going to help you do. And that's a tool in the entrepreneur's tool belt that they need to be using in order to grow their business in 2024.
Yeah. What I learned from Jack Welch on my GE days, what gets measured gets done.
There you go. I love it. I love it. Well, I think that's a great statement to end on. What gets measured gets done. And that's what we hope you do, small business leader, entrepreneur out there, that you define some key results, that you have your key performance indicators. We don't care which term you use. We just want you to do it. And make sure that you're defining that. And even if it's as simple as what the bakery did, one big objective and one metric that you're measuring by, that's great. Start the process, start doing it, talk to your team about it, hold them accountable to what it is that you're doing, and then just write us a thank you letter at the end of 2024, right?
Yes.
Is that the deal?
Yes.
That's the deal. Fantastic, Raj. Thank you so much. That was wonderful information. I know it was super helpful, clarifying for me. I love these conversations. I think they're very beneficial for small business leaders. And I hope you took some notes, listen to it again, invite your friends to listen to this podcast. And we're going to continue to give you these tools so that 2024 is your best year yet. So you all have a great week, and we'll see you on the next one. Raj, I will see you next week.
Okay. Thank you, Drew. It was an excellent. I wish everybody utilizes this and have an outstanding 2024.